Here's James.
There we go.
All right, go ahead.
Kia ora koutou katoa, aloha kako, good afternoon turulu blogeta, and bona ravian piram. My name is James Stiefvater. I'm a PhD candidate in development studies at Massey University. While spending time living and working and visiting in-laws in Papua New Guinea, I often heard a lot of talk about an idea called autonomy, or oftentimes special autonomy. The idea that people in the provinces perhaps could run things better than the central government. So it gave me the interest and the desire to look deeper into this and ask, Wanem, autonomy for what? And it's led me to identify three central factors in this discussion on autonomy: and identity, development, and decentralization, specifically within the New Guinea Islands region. So these key concepts are important to break down briefly. The micro-identity is something that we're very familiar with, especially if we've read the work of ethnographers over time, and there's no shortage of ethnographers that have worked in Papua. The macro identity is something that we're also pretty familiar with, especially if we've read works from people like Ernest Milner, Benedict Anderson, and latched onto the idea of the imagined community, these huge identities of. Something that is generally missing from the research is the idea or the concept or discussion of meso-identity, a mid-level identity, something at a provincial level or perhaps a regional level. I see this as something that is emerging in these discussions on identity, so it's very important. Looking into development, we're especially looking at the redistribution of resources to the provinces, particularly in the forms of budgets, infrastructures, and education. But even more recently, if you've read the news in PNG from the last maybe 4 to 48 hours, greater discussions on policing to quadruple the size of the police. And the overall idea of decentralization, taking powers from the central government, the state government, putting it out to the provinces in the form of special autonomy. And I put in quotes, special autonomy is generally very, very vaguely defined. And so there's a whole lot of dynamics going on between these things that I think are very important. Look. In doing so, I think that it's important to recognize Indigenous voices, Indigenous agency, and Indigenous experiences, especially in my position as one who is married into Papua New Guinea and has close relationships with many of the there, but still also bears experiences from outside of Papua New Guinea. So not creating the insider-outsider divide, still recognizing that there's a need for me to privilege Indigenous voices on my own. And I'm very interested in seeing how these then individual groups and identities and navigate between their own life worlds, their own ways of doing things, and government systems that have been imposed from outside sources, and how they're oftentimes taking their own ways of doing things and actually changing the systems that have been imposed on them, rather than letting those systems the way that they live there. This has led me to create three primary research questions. Political material meaning of identities, especially in relation to national identity or the state-based identity. The general Western assumption that your citizenship be your primary or your most important. Second, how do central government policies and practices of development affect these several identities? Lastly, how are then these options for decentralization, primarily in the form of special autonomy, being strategized to meet these evolving and changing and dynamic notions at the local and provincial level, so that they would ensure greater control over the redistribution of resources? I've chosen two study sites in Papua New Guinea. East New Britain Province for two reasons. East New Britain Province has a very long-standing discussion and push for Indigenous autonomy in that area, and also because right at the end of my little green arrow there is approximately the place where my wife was born. Filial connections there through marriage. And also the autonomous region of Bougainville there in blue. Bougainville has also had a very long-standing sense of autonomy and larger group identity, and is also slated for independence by way of a referendum that took years ago. In doing this research, I'll be using a talk story methodology. Talk story is very similar within the realm of indigenous appropriate methodologies like Palano or Purakal that was mentioned earlier. Talk story is especially centered in relationships, doing face-to-face fieldwork, and at the moment I'm waiting for a research visa, as well as digital talk story over WhatsApp or other digital communications technologies. And due to the large number of languages and my inability to learn all of them, there are 16 languages in East New Britain and 22 in Bougainville. I'll be using primarily English and the local vernacular of Talkpiece. This work is important to me, and I think important to broader academics as a whole, because a deeper understanding of these multiple interfaces and dynamic identities, the development practices and policies, how they also relate to decentralization, will assist in improving policies and delivery of development and governance, not just in the New Guinea Islands region, but Papua New Guinea. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, James. Kia ora. We've got 5 minutes for questions.